Hello, everyone. I want to talk today about two virtues that I think should be core tenets of any proper philosophy on how to live your life, any doctrine, what have you. And those are patience and acceptance. And there's a lot of good examples for why these things are so important, and I think they're especially needed today. But why do I make them such a core issue? So there's a couple examples of different things to think about in terms of this. In terms of patience, it's fun because there was a really great episode of Star Wars: The Clone Wars that featured Master Terra Sinube.
What? Who?
And I don't like to reference Star Wars too much because this is really about Earth philosophy and life. But this episode was really, really great because his entire approach to everything was patience. He was in no rush at any point in time. He was completely in the moment during the entire issue. If you haven't seen the show, there was an episode where Anakin Skywalker's Padawan Ahsoka loses her lightsaber, and so now she has to find it, and she doesn't want her master to find out, so she enlists the help of this very old Jedi Master. And the whole time, he seems to be kind of senile and sort of nonchalant and unexcitable, and he's just sort of going through the motions. And the way this episode is written is very interesting because it makes it seem like he's not going to be very much help. He's too laid back and almost like he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's just sort of bumbling. But ultimately, what ends up happening is he is constantly on top of everything. He is fully aware in every moment at all times. So much so that he's sensitive to when somebody is nervous and can tell that they're not telling the truth and acts accordingly. He is so far ahead prepared at most turns in the show when something happens that would otherwise blindside other characters. He's already taken future steps because he is that aware of what's happening around him, and he prepares in advance. I forget the exact quote, but near the end he mentions something that when you go slow you can see everything in front of you, or something along those lines. And that's a brilliant point. It's brilliant philosophy, because the truth is, yeah, if you go too fast, you're running by things faster than you can take them in. If you take your time, if you're patient and you pay attention, you're in the moment, you might still miss some things, but not much. And that also gives you a complete vision of what's around you and what you should be paying attention to and what you might not have to. One habit that I used to have personally in terms of this kind of way of doing things is I lived in New York City, and that is not a place known for patience at all. But I didn't want to be caught up in the flow of the city. I would make sure that whenever I was going out to do something, especially if it wasn't just part of my normal everyday, I would leave time in advance. In some cases, several hours. I wanted to be able to leisurely get to where I was going and take in things along the way. And a lot of times what that would afford me is the opportunity to stop in a subway station and listen to somebody putting on a concert. A lot of buskers out there who will play music. I can't tell you how many jazz and violin concerts I caught just impromptu because they were there. Or in some cases, I had the opportunity to, if you saw somebody who was begging on the side of the street, I had at one point, and there were several examples of this, but this was the best one. The guy needed food. So I just went to the food truck that was nearby. I bought some for him and for me, and I sat down with him prior to a date I had that night and just talked with him and found out his story and figured out, he actually had a plan for getting off the street and going and being with his family. So it was really a pleasant experience. You can't do those things if you are constantly rushing around, if you are always moving at the last minute to get exactly where you have to go at exactly the right time. I mean, that alone is just bad doctrine to begin with. You don't leave any opportunity for mistakes, and the world will introduce catches and roadblocks and all kinds of things to slow down the perfect, getting around, like a commute to work. Yeah, most of the time you're probably going to be fine, But if you don't leave the chance of construction or a car being towed off the side of the road or something like that, when it does happen, you're in trouble. That's not going to be a good day. And so think about that. By doing things in a way that doesn't allow you to be patient, you put a lot of stress on yourself. If you just prepare a little bit more in advance, or give yourself some leeway, do things in a way so that you can be more leisurely with your approach to things. If you are more patient, there's less stress. And things can tend to flow smoother. And there's all kinds of different ways to look at this. In life, in general, though, in terms of being patient, everything takes time, more or less. And we've now got a society where we have such quick access to everything at all times via technology and communication tools that we've been sort of conditioned to believe that something should happen now, whenever something is going to happen. And this is something of a hallucination. It takes time to develop a career. It takes time to raise a family, a child. It takes time to... Really, it takes time to do anything. The thing you're doing, more or less. It takes time to make a good meal, as opposed to just throwing a TV dinner in the microwave to actually sit down and cut the vegetables and do all the things. And for the record, personally, that's something that I falter with terribly. I am not a fan of cooking at all. I am impatient when it comes to food. And so I recognize that's not the best way to be, though. It really isn't. And there's a lot of nutrition lost when you behave that way. So it's a good example, because a little bit of patience in the kitchen would go a long way towards health and vitality. And speaking of health, in that matter, there's a lot of things that can become frustrating. People are very impatient with losing weight. People can be impatient with gaining muscle. In terms of health, in business, people want to see results right away. They want to be the next Facebook or what have you. Not realizing that, for starters, that's a unicorn. It's rarely going to happen. And for most people, it takes time. For a lot of success, it takes time. A lot of times, successful people seem like they were born overnight. Like that something happened, they had a breakthrough, and their company or whatever they're working on, their art, just explodes and becomes bigger and bigger, exponentially bigger, in no time flat. And it seems like, well, they got it. They were in the right place at the right time, ignoring the 7 to 12 to 20 years it took to get to that point. There's all of the grind prior to the breakthrough for most people. That's the way it is. And more so, too, there's a great phrase here we can think about. You want to consider that, chances are, and, I hope it's true, that you have a lot of life ahead of you. A year can be a long time. 10 years is an enormously long time. 50 years, forget it. You can't even conceptualize all the things that can happen in that span of a time, let alone all of the time that has ever existed. I mean, when we're dealing with these things, they are very hard to conceptualize because there's so much infinite potential in them. But the phrase that's really interesting is people tend to overestimate what they can get done in a year and underestimate what they can get done in 10 years. And what's really profound about that statement, if you think about it, is a lot of people want to get everything done now. We are sort of conditioned to have this immediate gratification mindset. It's embedded in everything we do now. Even straight down to the electronics, even expensive electronics that we buy, are not made to be repaired and taken care of over time. They're made to be replaced and disposed of. Immediate gratification. But the reality is, things do take some investment. Things do take time to grow and accumulate. And then eventually, that growth compounds. There's a concept that a lot of people like to teach about compounding interest. And one of the great examples, and a very simple example, and you can do the math yourself, this is really quite easy, is taking a penny per day. So, and this is a funny example because it doesn't require a lot of patience, but you can ask somebody, I will give you this penny. And you have two options. One, hold the penny, give it back to me at the end of 30 days. I will give you $1 million. Or two, place it in this box, and every day I will double it for the next 30 days. Which deal would you take? And it seems counterintuitive, but you will have multiples on that million if you take the doubling every day. Because at first it's not a lot. It's 2 cents, then 4 cents, then 8 cents, then 16 cents. It takes a while before it ever breaks $1. But by the end of the month, it's several million. Throw in one more day, it ends up to be something like $12 million. It's ludicrous. But many things are that way. Given enough time, all of your efforts compound to give you the ultimate result that you're looking for. But they take time. So pick something, tend to it for a while. Think about the farmer planting. You go out to the field, you put the seeds in the ground, and then you have to maintain that soil for a long time without seeing anything. You have to be patient before the crops will actually grow, and then you can harvest them. An entire season before you can actually get the food, the results of your efforts. But if you do this intellectually, the result is very much worth the effort. And all things are this way. I heard it said once before, can't you just see the farmer going out to the field and say, just give me a crop and then I'll plant next year? And a lot of people are like that. You know, we need it now. And there's a lot of pressure and intensity. But that's just not how things work. So, that being said, this relates to acceptance, and is why I wanted to talk about both virtues at the same time. Because in order to be patient, there are many things that you have to be able to accept. And I love the Serenity Prayer from AA meetings. I was actually very surprised to find out that it is not actually something from the Christian Bible. It was concocted for 12-step groups. But it's a brilliant prayer. And it's, if you haven't heard it before, it says, please grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. I believe the strength to change the things that I can, and the knowledge to know the difference between the two, or the wisdom to know the difference between the two. And here's what's interesting. The serenity to accept the things which I cannot change. Here's what you can't change. Everything that's not you. And someone says, well, wait a minute. I can vote. I can protest. I can get involved locally, politically. I can get involved in my school, whatever have you. You can be active and work towards change. To some extent, that's true. But what you have there is not the power to make change, but the power to influence to a greater or lesser extent. And that influence is going to be affected by, how well people know you, trust you, and like you, how persuasive you can be. Many factors alter influence. But the power to change is absolute. But the only place where it is absolute is within you. On the other hand, well, that seems like, okay, well, that's the only thing you can change. That is a lot of power and a lot of responsibility to have. But it can also require patience and acceptance. You have to accept the way things are. You have to be willing to work with the world the way it is so that you can intelligently work on yourself. I'm not telling you have to like the way the world is. I don't believe you should, to some extent. There will always be something that's wrong because we are imperfect creatures. But what you do have to do is focus on, okay, what can I do about this? As Gandhi once put it, be the change you wish to see in the world. And that doesn't mean that you can only work on what you do, but it does mean that that's the only thing you have control over, and that's where all of your power lies. And it is a lot of power. There's a lot you can do. And I implore you, along these lines, to be a constructive force. It's very easy to get upset about the way things are and to lash out and to want to tear it down, Right now, it seems like we have a culture of outrage, and people are very motivated by their outrage. But what I would submit to you is that this is a destructive response. If what you are doing is hating something because it's wrong and trying to tear it down or dismantle or whatever have you, and you're not moving towards anything, you haven't picked a positive result to build towards, you don't know what will replace what you're tearing down. We hope that it would be better, but you're leaving that to the whims of the masses, which sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That is a very chaotic approach. If you can accept that things are the way they are, that is reality, doesn't mean you have to like it, but if you can accept it, and you can make sense of why, employing empathy, which is probably a topic for another day, but thinking about people in terms of who they are and why they're doing what they're doing from the perspective of assuming that first they're human. Then you can start to think about and negotiate, what do I do now? In a more micro way of thinking about this, and something of a microcosm in your personal life. Let's talk about health again, because I've had this experience of being overweight and needing to lose weight, and it's very hard. You struggle with it. And one of the reasons I personally struggled, or at least what it seems like, was that I didn't accept where I was. When I did finally lose the weight, and I did lose quite a bit. I lost about 60 pounds, which was about the extra weight I had. There was one revelatory moment where I was listening to a fitness trainer, and he said, a lot of people want to work towards getting that perfect six-pack in the magazine or look like Brad Pitt. And he said, but that's their body. That's not yours. Even if you lost all the weight, you don't know what your six-pack is going to look like because it's genetics. And you can't change your genetics. And for whatever reason, that struck me very profoundly, and I realized, okay, well, yeah, the body I have is the only body I'm going to have. I have to take it as it is. And for whatever it will be, I suddenly realized I couldn't pick and choose out of a catalog like I'm shopping for a body what I was going to look like. I realized I was only going to get mine, and it was going to look like whatever it was going to look like based on what I was doing with it, how I was treating it. And I had to accept whatever that was. For the most part, if I didn't like the way it looked being my body, then I had the opportunity to make intelligent discretionary decisions to change that. But I couldn't have somebody else's body. I couldn't change it in such a way that I look like somebody else, obviously without surgery or things like that. But that's not what I was looking to do in the first place. It was very profound and opened my mind up to this idea that there are a lot of arbitrary markers for what we should do, who we should be, how we should look, what's ideal. There are a lot of prescriptions for what's ideal in the world, and everybody's got their own for you. It's certainly something you can do if you want to go out on the internet, go on Twitter, and just look through random timelines. You will find every possible prescription for who and how and what you should be. I implore you, don't do that. It's impossibly confusing. You will never be able to create a good life for yourself doing that. So one of the things that I would say you have to accept is that those people are out there. And they're going to try. They want you to be a certain way because in some ways it reinforces their view. That's, I think, a lot of what's happening today is people want to see a public consensus. They want everybody to do what they're doing because that's how they justify what they believe is right. There is not a lot of thinking, I believe, questioning and analyzing the way we're thinking. And that's a totally different topic for another day. But this is also very important. But so you have to accept that those people are there. You also have to accept that you have to accept whatever's happened in your life. Even the terrible things. And I am fully sensitive and sympathetic to how terrible life can be, to how terrible your past might be. I've had my share of difficulties. I know plenty of people who have seen the most horrifying evils. Again, this isn't something I'm saying you have to like it. When I say acceptance, when I say you have to accept what has been, what your life has been, and what, the things that you have been through, it means you understand they're part of your story. You can't change them. In some cases, you might not be able to get justice. Dwelling on that does you no good. And I'm not saying it's fair. In a lot of cases, it's not. But what you have control over is yourself. And you are also the person that you are most responsible to for taking care of. You have to love yourself above all else. And you have to be the person who loves you the most and is willing to protect you, because you can't always count on other people to do it. Again, something else to accept. And these are hard things. These are hard pills to swallow. I fully understand that. I fully appreciate that. But if you can do it, if you can become your own warrior, your own protector, and you can accept what has happened to you, and that not necessarily you can move past it, but you are stronger than it, which is evident by virtue of the fact that you are alive, that you are here. You have already survived it. Love yourself and respect yourself for that too. Once you can accept that, then you realize you have so much more power than you might previously have given yourself credit for. Now you have the power of choice about who are you going to be now, who are you going to create, what are you going to work towards, what are you going to place your efforts towards. And I am not presuming this is always easy. I want to make this clear. I understand that it's easy to say these things. It is not easy to live by them. But it is paramount that you do. Once you can accept your past, once you can accept that you have no control over the rest of the world, that every day you're going to run into people who are going to say things you're going to despise. They're going to do things that are going to annoy you and frustrate you. That there is every kind of goodwill and evil in the world, and at some point or another you're going to be exposed to it. Now you can figure out how to deal with it, how to go about into the world, dancing with these things in a way that keeps you intact. And then you can also start to work on what can you do about it. Once you accept the way things are and you have a proper view of it, you have a accurate paradigm, a map of the way things are, now you can start to make sense. Well, I don't like this. What can I do about it? The answer might be that you create something. I don't like the way things are socially. Perhaps there's an app you can create. Perhaps there is a series of audio broadcasts you can create. Perhaps there is a group you can get involved with and promote and help them with whatever your skill is, so that they are more powerful, better positioned to do their work. Perhaps, as there are some examples in the world, you can be a source of love to people who know only hate. And in doing that, show them that there are other ways of being. There are so many great examples of people who have shown love, compassion, and understanding to some of the most egregious people in society. And the result is that they turned those hateful people around. If you can accept somebody else, even in their wrongness, you can enact very real change in the world in a profound way. This is not something that is forced. This is something that flows, perhaps through the force. by using creative forces. And perhaps there is some embodiment of that. Maybe there is a way to think about the Force in this context where there's a creative aspect to it, and it flows most freely when you are moving towards something constructive. But in order to construct, we need the virtues of patience and acceptance. And I think that's about all I need to say about this right now. I want to thank you for listening. I hope you got something out of this. Any comments, please feel free. I'm more than open to challenging any of these ideas and discussing them further, and I hope we get the opportunity to do that. If you haven't already seen it, checked it out. I do have a Facebook page for this, whatever, for this movement I've started, for this philosophical journeying. And I hope you'll consider joining it. I will leave links in the description. And of course, may the Force be with you.